Next on Arizona 360, checking in with the president's supporters in rural Arizona.
I think his tweeting is wonderful because it goes directly to the people.
And 1 year later, the Women's March looks beyond the White House.
He's going to go at some point, and women are going to continue on.
Plus, uncertainty surrounds a ban on uranium mining in northern Arizona.
If the water was to be contaminated, we believe that the existence of the Havasupai will disappear.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thank you for joining us. President Donald Trump delivered his first State of the Union address this week, an 80-minute speech touching on everything from health care to immigration. His rise to the Oval Office largely due to support from voters in rural communities. That compelled us to check in with supporters of then-candidate Trump to see how the last year shaped their views of his presidency. Arizona 360 traveled to the community of Sonoita Elgin in northeastern Santa Cruz County and watched the speech with Trump supporters. But first, a bit about this pocket of southern Arizona. Founded in the late 1880s, the Sonoita Elgin Valley got its start with cattle and mining. Today, one of the things this town is known for, vineyards. Kent Callaghan's family started one of the first in the 90s.
In terms of selling wine, it's certainly easier now. Local first, those types of things, locavore, they've obviously dovetailed with the increase in exposure and drinking of Arizona wines.
Today, there are more than a dozen. Wineries have tripled in the last 10 years.
I mean, the cattle business for years has been the primary economic activity, and it's still here. The money that is generated not simply from wine sales and employment, but also from people, the spin-off revenue that's generated from gas sales, merchandise in restaurants in town is substantial.
Fair mix of business, retirees, and families make up the community of about 1,000. Todd Bostock runs a winery while raising a young family in a small town with limited resources.
Getting access to high-speed internet has been challenging, and it's definitely becomes an issue for kids as more school work goes online. Like any school program, whether it's in the city or not, it needs to be supplemented by folks at home and engagement with parents in the school.
A transplant from Phoenix, this father of two says there's a clear difference between urban and rural living.
It's things that you wouldn't think of that took getting used to. It took us a while to figure out that we always needed to have a cooler in the car to buy groceries. Learn how to deal with trash at your house so that animals don't get into it. And maybe getting used to the silence.
Sound, though, comes from one school with about 115 students. The kids here are like any other bunch you'll find on a playground.
You can go to a school where you can play fun sports and have fun with your friends. It's really nice.
Small town living, this is rural Arizona. Limited retail and healthcare, it's a way of life.
Well, you make a trade-off. This is so nice, I'm going to give up this, or I'm going to take a risk on this. But for this, it's worth it.
Matt Pirelli is a retiree who spends his time soaking in the sunsets.
Everything just settles down. The birds don't fly, the dogs don't bark.
A Chicago native, he first visited Arizona in the 70s while on temporary duty at nearby Fort Huachuca.
After about the fourth visit, I was captured, by this time of day and these kinds of views, and they're just so spectacular.
A diverse community, Santa Cruz County has more registered Democrats than Republicans. Pirelli is a Republican who supports President Trump. On State of the Union night, he and a few conservative friends gathered to watch the president's address.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
All five of you support Donald Trump 1 year ago and still today? 100%?
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed.
Fair to say everyone in this room conservative?
Yes.
Conservative Republican, okay?
Well, not so much the latter, but the prior.
There's a difference nowadays between conservative and Republican.
I bet there is.
Yes.
What do we think President Donald Trump represents?
Definitely conservative.
Conservative. What would you say is the difference between conservative and Republican? Anybody want to tackle that one?
I'm an independent, and I left the Republican Party years ago because as far as I was concerned, they were on the same course as the Democrats were. an institution to themselves, not serving the people. And you say the difference between a Republican and a conservative? Conservative has family values, believes in the family, believes in God, and what this nation was built out of.
Over the next few weeks, the House and Senate will be voting on an immigration reform package, one where nobody gets everything they want, but where our country gets the critical reforms it needs and must have.
We've had porous borders and disregard for illegal crossings and entries for 30 years. And neither party, Democrats nor Republicans, have truly tried to tackle it.
As far as DACA is concerned, I probably have a different opinion than many people do. They didn't commit a crime, their parents did. And I'm just one generation away from being in that same boat, except for the fact that my grandparents came here legally. And I'm a first-generation American. I'm grateful that they did it the right way. When I see the demonstrations down in Tucson, I think there have been some really nice interviews with nice people, you know, that talk about wanting to be a doctor. But then I see other people looking at the cameras and giving us the middle finger, and I think, sure, we should want you. No, I don't think so. But the guy that wants to be a doctor and the woman that wants to do something good, be a teacher, absolutely.
Embrace our values.
We need to keep those people.
And together we are building a safe, strong, and proud America.
That's one thing we're missing in this immigration program is the assimilation. We don't see, you know, the immigrants, the illegals that are here assimilating and picking up the values that this country was built on. I want to have a little Mexico. You know, my loyalty is to Mexico. I fly the Mexican flag. American kids can't wear the American flag on Cinco de Mayo because it might cause a problem. I mean, you see the standards just tumbling out of control.
A lot of times we've heard the argument that our nation was founded by immigrants, you know, dreamers. Are we just seeing that new generation of that right now?
No, that's different. It's way entirely different.
Why?
Our forefathers here, the original pilgrims, didn't come here because there were bright shining lights and banks full of money and taxi cabs and all that stuff. They came here to escape persecution, and it was religious persecution. So they came here for religious freedom. That's the basic foundation of how we got started.
Well, if you want to come here to become an American, I mean, I would not want to go to a foreign country and bring everything and try to implement my standards to their country.
What really lies behind the discomfort with the press, the media, and the analysis that we were about to hear?
I think it's almost offensive that they need to tell us what we just heard. And then they're going to evaluate
From their perspective,
what was important and what wasn't important, and we don't need that. So that's why I was glad to not hear it.
It's like the dumbing down of Americans, you know. We don't get to have our own opinion anymore. We get to listen to some talking head sit and tell you what they think Trump said or didn't say. Personally, I long for the days when journalism was a real thing, a talent, somebody that you remembered. And that doesn't happen anymore. Now you've got a bunch of people that sit in front of the camera and gossip.
This is a moment of history and high drama here in Washington. An embattled president under investigation, a Congress mired in partisan conflict.
It's like something that got said on tonight, and I can't say who said it on the TV, that Trump was under investigation. He is not. He's going to be asked to give some testimony, but he is not under investigation. So that was a basic untruth. But do you know how many people out there listening will believe that?
One of the things I was really excited about was his reference to the Capitol.
This Capitol, this living monument, this is the monument to the American people.
And I thought that was a really good reminder that everyone on both sides of the aisle need to realize we represent a thing bigger than our party and bigger than even my state. And I really was inspired a little bit when he referenced that part of it. And I thought it would have been really a neat lead into, I will now stop tweeting and treat people with really tremendous respect and be a leader with that. But I missed that part.
Over the last year, he has said some things via social media or in front of a microphone that have made people very uncomfortable. Do all of you feel that there is some of that?
His job is not to make everybody comfortable if he's going to make the change come about. I think his tweeting is wonderful because it goes directly to the people. It's not filtered through the press, either the conservative press or the other side. It's what he believes and what he says.
It's a very, very clever and successful way to keep your base pulled together.
That's right.
Well, I think it's great to speak directly to the American people. I just wish he would stop with the disrespectful way that he does it.
Can he be offensive? Absolutely. I'm not going to defend that. But he also gets information out that people can then go back and challenge the media and say, okay, which way is this? Which way are we really going? Why are you saying these kinds of things when it's something else over here? It's up to us as individuals to do our homework. Once we see something, whether it's a news person or President Trump that says it, then do your homework and get down to the basic of what it really is.
One of the reasons Trump got elected was because people were really tired of the status quo government. They didn't want another polished politician, and they got what they voted for. He is not a politician, and he is most definitely not polished. He's a man that is used to saying what he thinks and doing what he can afford to do. He is in that office taking no salary. It's really amazing that he continues to stay there, and I hope that he does continue to put up with the nonsense that he puts up with for nothing. And by for nothing, I mean no salary.
And God bless America. Good night.
A year ago, one day after President Trump's inauguration, they marched by the tens of thousands in cities across the U.S. and around the world. The Women's March in Tucson numbered 15,000. 1 year later, organizers marked the anniversary with a vigil and plans for another march in 2019. Leaders behind the movement, Shelley Weiss and Pamela Backel, told me how their message changed the past year and where their activism will go next.
Judging by the numbers that happened last year when we had the full-blown march, we expected 5,000 people, and we had 15,000 people that showed up for the march, so it's rather large.
Pam, why do you suppose we've had people just turn out in droves for this?
Well, I think it was the day after the inauguration of President Trump, and I think everybody there was disappointed in his election and wanted to make a statement about what they did support, which was diversity and helping people that are having a hard time and not excluding people.
What specifically would you say the goal has become for the group, for the organization?
The original vision and guiding principles was to make sure that everyone of every race, color, ethnicity, religion, that we were all treated equally. But since then, I've looked at what the Women's March has become, and they really have created a vision that's much more expanded on that. And it's ending violence and war. It's making sure that there are workers' rights, civil rights, disability rights, immigrant rights, and environmental justice. So in the beginning, it was kind of, I think, a reactionary response, but now it's really developed into a worldwide movement of women declaring the end of these kind of things.
Pam, it began with the election of President Trump, but it's deviated to another direction, or is it still part of that foundation?
He's going to go at some point, and women are going to continue on. And there's a lot of these problems have been highlighted because of his presidency and kind of exacerbated, but he will be gone and we will continue on.
Trump is just one person. He is just one president, and his term will come to an end. But he's not the only person across this globe. He's not the only leader that has created this problem. And so we want that to come to an end. And there's a global change.
These are issues, though, that women and men both face. So where is that balance in? It's not just a women's movement. It also includes everyone.
At the march, when there were 15,000 people, there was a lot of men there. And there are men who have a consciousness and an awareness because of maybe their wives and their daughters, and they want these things to stop too.
Shelley, how do you measure success? How will you know that you've achieved something that's unique and truly groundbreaking?
I think the measure of success will be when we see the lessening of war, when we see people stand up and say we shouldn't rape the land for resources. When those types of things become alleviated, as they become alleviated, that's really the success.
Back to the State of the Union and what was missing Tuesday night. The president's off-the-cuff style normally delivered in his tweets. Professor Kate Kensky teaches at the University of Arizona in the Department of Communication and the School of Government and Public Policy. We asked her if President Trump's Twitter feed still affects how his more cordial speeches land with audiences.
People are adding context to when they see his speeches, and that, in essence, is a problem. Because although he was what we expect out of presidents in delivering a speech last night, one of the issues is that there is all that baggage from the social media. And so part of the country, the one that's in the middle and is not really sure what to think, they're not really crazy about the Democrats, but they don't necessarily like him, are in a bit of a bind, as well as the Democrats who just don't see goodwill because of that social media baggage going into the speech.
The transparency that we see in social media, I mean, he's got 40 million followers, he's tweeting pretty regularly. Is that what people want to see in their president given this day and age? You know, we're digital now.
I would say that, like most things in the country, it's a polarized reaction. I think that if you're someone who was a Trump supporter going in, and you like some of his more inflammatory statements, that's a great thing that he's tweeting and that he is being, very, as you would see it, being very transparent. If you're someone who doesn't like his policies, isn't crazy about his tone, it's something that he'd rather not do.
We didn't hear words like I or me. What do you make of that?
Strategically, that's what, in a sense, politicians should be doing. The State of the Union is historically a speech that not only tells Americans hopefully where we're headed with some nuggets of policy statements, but symbolically tells us that we are a strong, unified country.
We've never had a president like this. We've never really had social media. Is there really any basis for comparison when we look at the history of our presidents and communication styles?
Well, I would say that this is certainly a time of changing norms and perhaps of changing traditions. And so it's hard to see, where things will be in the future. Again, I think that these moments, can be really good because the thing is that during our day-to-day, people tend to consume information that resonates with what they want to hear and with what they already believe. And so we do need these social square moments where everyone, regardless of how you feel about the speaker, comes together so that we have some kind of commonality in our social fabric. If we want to hold politicians accountable, we need to know what they've said in their various major speeches so that if those promises are not met, in a year's time, in 2 years' time, we know that it was the speech that was sort of the record of those promises.
President Trump dismantled a number of Obama-era initiatives during his first year in office, and that could eventually include a ban on uranium mining near the Grand Canyon. Vanessa Barchfield brings us the story.
The canyon mine is located at the end of a dirt road in the Kaibab National Forest, about 6 miles south of the Grand Canyon. Deep below the muddy surface, the earth here is rich with uranium. Today, it's the only working uranium mine on the land surrounding the Grand Canyon, and in fact, no uranium is being extracted yet. Canyon Mine's still under construction. Its existence is a major point of contention between environmental groups, tribes, the mining industry, and local and federal entities. But before we get to that, a little history. In the years after World War II and the early days of the Cold War, the U.S. was racing to develop an arsenal of nuclear weapons. That led to a massive boom in uranium mining.
A lot of these mines were on the Navajo Nation, and a lot of people got rich and a lot of Navajo got sick.
Back in the 1950s and 60s, there wasn't any regulation, so to speak, on uranium mining. It was just basically a bunch of unventilated, dirty little holes in the ground. Miners were exposed to radon gas, unsafe mining conditions underground.
And when companies left, they simply abandoned their mines without cleaning them up, which has led to a long legacy of water contamination on the reservation. By the 1970s, most of the uranium being mined around the world was used in nuclear power plants. And Frank Bain says the mining industry cleaned itself up.
The modern industry is highly regulated. The health of the miners is a very high priority type thing for the mining companies to be looking after.
Over the decades, the price of uranium has been highly volatile. A spike in prices in the mid-2000s led to a flurry of companies staking claims for uranium mines on the public lands near the Grand Canyon. A coalition of groups band together to lobby the previous administration to intervene.
The Interior Secretary under President Obama, Ken Salazar, was persuaded that this poses too much of a risk.
So in 2012, the Obama administration introduced a 20-year withdrawal, or we'll call it a ban, on new mining claims on more than 1 million acres of land near the Grand Canyon. 11 existing mining operations were allowed to continue, including Canyon Mine. Opponents, like the Grand Canyon Trust, make a number of arguments against the mine.
We are pragmatically opposed to contaminating springs and waterways around the Grand Canyon, around the Four Corners area, and the history and the legacy of that contamination is our evidence for being concerned.
Clark also says that the Canyon Mine's plan of operations was originally drafted in the mid-1980s, when the mine was first approved. The company that owns it, Energy Fuels, put the project on hiatus between then and 2012, yet the plans haven't changed.
Two of our strongest supporters for development of the Canyon Mine is the Forest Service and the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. And I can assure you that neither of those groups would allow the Canyon Mine to go forward if they thought there was going to be any risk to the environment.
Now, scientists with the United States Geological Survey have said their ability to study the risk to the environment has been hindered by inconsistent federal funding. And there's still significant unknowns when it comes to the impact that uranium mining has on groundwater. The Grand Canyon Trust's Roger Clark is more certain about the risks.
The science is clear. Uranium mining contaminates the surface and ground and the groundwater, and there's no way to entirely avoid that and to mitigate it.
The Grand Canyon watershed provides drinking water to approximately 25 million people.
That's because it feeds into the Colorado River. Energy Fuels' Mark Chalmers says uranium is already naturally eroding into the Colorado, and not because of mining.
When you're in the Grand Canyon, there's actually a number of places you can go out and touch uranium right on the edge of the canyon walls that is currently eroding into the Colorado.
Environmental groups say it's not the naturally occurring uranium that worries them.
The Havasupai people, whose sole source of water is the groundwater beneath Canyon Mine, are really in a position of being guinea pigs.
We are opposed to Canyon Mine for many reasons. One of the reasons is that it is located right above our water source, Red Wamo Aquifer.
Mining consultant Frank Bain says the risk to the aquifer is blown out of proportion.
I just don't buy that. I don't see the direct link between the uranium mines and a water table that's 1,000 feet deeper.
If the water was to be contaminated, we believe that the existence of the Havasupai will disappear.
There is no potential risk for the Canyon Mine to contaminate the water at Havasupai. Zero, none.
Carletta Tuluzzi says it's not just about the water. The mine is already desecrating the Havasupai's sacred site.
We have evidence to prove that there is a lot of rock writings, pottery shards, ancient trails, including burial sites in that area that we're very concerned about, and we want those areas to be protected.
I just want to say that we are not going to harm the indigenous communities or the Navajos or the Havasupais, and we're certainly not going to harm the Grand Canyon.
But mining's impact on the Grand Canyon is a point of contention for the Coconino County Board of Supervisors, which has long opposed uranium mining in the area.
We believe very strongly that that those who take the risks of uranium mining are our residents, our tribal partners, our communities, and those who take the benefit do not typically live here. And we want to make sure that we protect these assets for our local economies, our regional economies, and our communities.
Energy Fuels' Mark Chalmers says there's a lot of focus on the negatives of Canyon Mine.
And there's a heck of a lot of positives about the Canyon Mine, and one is clean energy.
He points to the fact that uranium is used in the nuclear power plants that generate 20% of the electricity in this country. Roger Clark at the Grand Canyon Trust says though nuclear's carbon footprint is less than coal's, that's not the full picture.
It still takes fossil fuels to mine, to move, and to provide that service.
And he says the federal government is still bearing the cost of cleaning up more than 500 contaminated mines on the Navajo reservation.
And then on the tail end, what do you do with the nuclear waste, and where does that go? And who's going to pay for managing and containing that for the next 10,000 years?
Now, remember earlier when we were talking about the volatility of uranium prices? Well, today they're extremely low, in part because Japan shut down its nuclear reactors after the disaster at Fukushima.
There's this big glut of uranium that's on the world market now, and nobody's using it, and the price has basically gone from $130 or $40 a pound down to $20. At $20 a pound, you can't afford to mine uranium. I think uranium mining around here is dead.
I think Mr. Bain's conclusion that the uranium industry is dead is premature, and he knows as well as anyone else that watches the market that it's cyclic. It's on a down cycle right now, but it could be back this year.
And Energy Fuels is betting on uranium prices rebounding. Mark Chalmers says right now prices are too low for his company to extract any uranium from Canyon Mine.
Most of the world producers of uranium need prices in the order of $50 per pound to make them profitable to go forward.
As Energy Fuels waits for prices to trend upward, the Trump administration is now considering reversing the 20-year ban, following a recommendation last year from the U.S. Forest Service. Roger Clark says his group is concerned the ban will be overturned.
It would allow an indeterminate number of uranium claims to move forward and become mines in those watersheds that drain directly into the Grand Canyon.
His organization, the Havasupai, and other groups say they'll continue to fight to keep mining out of the region. And as the debate goes on, Energy Fuels continues work on developing Canyon Mine. Its shaft goes a bit deeper into the ground each day.
Before we go, a look at what's ahead on Arizona 360. A conversation with former Congressman Jim Colby, one of the negotiators of NAFTA who served what is now Southern Arizona's 2nd Congressional District. Among the topics we covered, the divide on Capitol Hill.
I consider myself a conservative, but if I were in the House of Representatives today, they would not consider me a conservative Republican. There used to be much more working across the aisle than there is today. There's still quite a bit of that goes on behind the scenes. But out in public, it's much more polarized. The social media, which is hardly a good way to do public policy in 140 characters, it has really contributed, I think, to the talk that we have and the fact that it's not very constructive.
More of our conversation next week. That's all for now. If you have any feedback, email us at arizona360@azpm.org. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.